March 27th, 2023, Finance and Audit Committee meeting. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Certainly. So we have Member Arias
Presente.
and Vice Chair Maxwell, absent at the moment, and Chair Esparza.
Present.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
We have a quorum. Okay. I'll make a motion for approval of the agenda.
Second.
All right. Any opposition to approving the agenda? Seeing none, agenda is approved. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes in the last meeting on October 28th, 2022.
Second.
All right. Any opposition to approving? Wait, do you have to go out to public comment on the minutes?
Right, yes.
Okay. So actually, we're going to go out to public comments on approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Is there anyone from the public here in person or on Zoom who would like to speak with respect to the approval of the minutes of the last meeting? Anyone on Zoom? No one in person? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and I'll call for the question. Any opposition to approval of the minutes from the last committee meeting? Seeing none, minutes are approved. Let the record reflect the Vice Chair has joined us at this time. And actually, we'll go ahead and do unscheduled communication at this point. If there's anyone from the public who would like to speak with respect to any Finance and Audit Committee item or topic, now would be the time to approach the dais here or raise your hand on Zoom.
There's no public comment on Zoom.
No public comment on Zoom. Seeing none in the chamber here, I'll go ahead and close unscheduled communication. And we will move over to our first open session item. We have three. The first is an update on the existing audits, and that's sponsored by the Finance Department. Welcome, Director.
Great. Thank you, Vice Chair Esparza, council members. Pleased to be with you here this afternoon. I'm joined by our Principal Internal Auditor, Critty, who will also provide some of the update and presentation this afternoon here. As we make our way to slide 2, as you mentioned, Vice Chair Esparza, these are the topics that we'll be covering. I'll turn it over here in a second to Critty to walk through the first couple of sections. There's a natural pause on slide 6 where we can take questions, but also happy to take questions as we work through each slide if that's what you'd like to do instead, as I'll be transferring or transitioning to presenting the ACFR once Critty concludes her presentation. But again, happy to be with you here this afternoon, and at this time, I'll turn it over to Critty.
Good afternoon. Oh, yeah, sorry. Okay. So we have two currently existing audits. The first one being our airports audit, which I believe we did discuss at the last Finance and Audit Committee, where we talked about how we had initially gone in and done a review with the airport's management. We met with their staff, and we also reviewed policies and procedures as well as some contracts and expenditures. And based upon that initial review, we decided to come back in about 12 months. Since that time, it is my understanding that airports is currently in the process of making those necessary internal control changes and implementing those controls in place. In addition, they recently did hire a new assistant director. Additional details on the specific changes, I believe Henry is in the audience right now if you do have additional questions for details on those changes that are currently being implemented.
If I may, my recollection of the last update was that the department was unable to be audited because of staffing shortages and other issues. And they were asking for essentially grace in order to get their house in order prior to an audit taking place.
Yes.
Is their house in order? And can an audit begin?
They are currently in the process of putting in those implementations. In order for an audit to really to have weight and to get the results that we're actually, because we want to see those results, we would actually need a good amount of time to be lapsed in between implementing those changes giving some time to put those changes into place, and then the audit team usually goes in about 12 months after those changes have been put in place, and then we can go ahead and review them. So there is enough data for us to actually analyze.
I understand, but again, we couldn't initiate an audit because there was staff shortages. They asked for a grace period. It's been a year.
So when we finalized that memo, I believe it was September of 2022. So we're looking
Correct,
at.
but you did your review months prior to the memo being finalized, correct?
Yes, we had done the review the few months before. Yes, we completed it, I guess, the initial review by about September.
Right. So what I'm asking is the department ready to be audited? Because it's not like this department is stagnant. It continuously spends money every weekday. So is the department now ready to be audited? Is there sufficient staffing in place and all the other things that needed to take place in order for the audit to commence?
I believe we don't have enough data to actually conduct the field work. So that's why we want to wait until about the September timeframe of this year to begin the process of starting the audit.
Councilmember, if I might add, I would agree with that time.
It's okay.
Sorry, I had med garlic sauce.
Hey, Manager, what I'm asking is, I know
Yeah.
I know the department needed some time to
Yeah.
get staffing
So we
positions
will, by the
adjusted.
time that's September. We just had the brand-new Assistant Director for Operations start last week. We're recruiting and I think the one that's most critical for this audit is the finance position. And that position is in recruitment. I believe it's on the street right now. If not, it's going to be any time now. So as soon as that position comes on board, that will help the department be able to provide all the background and work papers that are needed for the audit division to complete their work.
So are you confident that the audit will commence in September of this year?
I feel pretty good about that.
Okay, that's my question. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? Okay. Moving on to the wireless audit, which we are currently in field work. We are reviewing the adequacy of the controls regarding the wireless device assignment and oversight of those controls. Currently, the total amount of wireless expenses that we are auditing is around $4.3 million. So as I just mentioned, that audit is we're pretty close to wrapping up the field work, so we should be starting the report writing phase in the next several weeks. So the goal, yes, is to hopefully by the next audit committee meeting is to be hopefully in the draft of the report writing, almost at completion standpoint for the audit.
What does this include beyond cell phones and tablets? What else would this include?
It's actually just cell phones right now.
Oh, just
Yeah,
cell phones, okay.
yeah.
Does that include cell phones for the police department and fire, and the radio systems, or just individual cell phones?
We're reviewing citywide wireless devices that have been issued to the department employees. So that could potentially include fire or PD.
So we have $4.3 million of devices, worth of devices issued, worth of cell phones only issued citywide?
Wireless devices, yeah.
Wow. Just cell phones, yeah.
My apologies, yes, in a 3-year period, yeah. That's in a 3-year period, yeah.
3-year period?
Yeah.
What's the amount of devices?
The amount of, I would have to go back and let you know. That's ever changing. As of right now, it was over 1,000.
Okay, so out of 4,200 employees, probably 1,000 of them have individual cell phones assigned?
Yeah.
All right. It would be helpful if you can give us a breakdown when you do the report of what departments, how many units each department has, and if there's a policy in terms of who gets a device and what their usage are. Thank you.
Okay.
So, I don't know, maybe the director could shed some light on this, but this is cell phones only, 4.3 million. You said about 1,000 devices. That would average 4,300 per unit, which sounds high.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, just, $4.3 million, that's the amount of the cell phones to be audited. And they said about 1,000 devices, which averages to about 4,300 per unit, which per cell phone, which sounds like a lot. That's why I asked if we included tablets and other devices. It just seems like a lot.
I agree, Chair, as far as that does sound high. What she intended to do today and update you on is the fact that she is in the midst of field work. Those stats and that detail will be included when we get to the eventual documented report. So I'd love the opportunity to be certain about that. And again, we'll include what you requested as well, Member Arias, and you'll get all that kind of information in the table that accompanies the report once we furnish it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, yep, looking forward to it.
I'm going to move on to the next slide. Are there any other questions?
If I may, City Controller, I know all those cell phones their data is official public record. So I'd like to know what procedures IT follows with maintaining those public records when they're returned, or, they're just zeroed out as part of the audit, report. I want to make sure we're following, public record law.
So part of the report will include really CRITI's assessment of the policies and procedures as they align to the administrative orders. So that kind of detail she'll share in the report, basically making an assessment of the compliance with the orders that exist currently.
Correct.
And if there's any recommended
public record law.
I'm sorry?
That includes the retention of public records?
I would assume so, but we'll verify that.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions before I move on to the next slide? Okay. We are also, I would like to also provide a brief overview of our risk assessment process because we are also in the process of finalizing that as well. So the process entails our unit basically goes out and asks the city directors and assistant directors to provide responses to a questionnaire that we send via Teams. It's a Teams form that the department directors and assistant directors fill out. In addition to their responses, we also utilize additional factors which would include budgeted revenues and expenses, total number of employees, as well as we make point adjustments into when was the last time these departments were audited. Based upon that, the risk assessment generates the order and ranking of the departments and divisions, highest to lowest. I'm going to jump down to the next slide, if that's okay. So here's an example of the top, for the current year, for the fiscal year 23, of the top areas that we identified in the risk assessment. I'm going to jump down, if that's all right with you. Okay. Based upon that, this is the current year's audit plan that we have drafted for you all today. The first being, yes, ISD's wireless audit is the first one, which we are currently, as I mentioned, in field work. The next one being, and if you do have questions, the internal controls evaluation.
Yeah, I did want to provide a brief update on this second one. I know it was a significant topic of discussion at the last Finance and Audit Committee meeting, which of course I watched. So there's really two components here that I'm sure you'll recall: the internal controls assessment, and then an assessment and review of credit card expenditures over a time frame as well. So the update that we have for you at this time is an RFP has gone out to the street, has since been closed. We've received interest back from 6 respondents. 3 of them we would consider responsive to the original RFP, and so we're scheduling interviews. In fact, I think they're scheduled for next week. So we expect to have something back to the full council with a proposal to basically commence that work with a firm sometime in late April, maybe May.
So following from that would be a parks audit following from that as well. And these are just in order of rankings from the risk assessment, but then it would be airports, which we, as we just mentioned, that will start in about September, in the September timeframe of this year. And then the last 2 being parks, utilities, and public works. At this point, we have a good stopping point if there are additional questions before the controller will provide an update on the AFCR.
I see parks as
proposed number 3, but I don't see it in the top 10 of the highest risk score. How did they end up here?
Yeah, so they actually, and there's a notation right down at the bottom, this was actually an audit that was scheduled previously, so it has, since it was on the prior year's audit plan, we have to complete that as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
In the parks audit, are you going to be looking at Measure P audit requirements, or is it going to be an audit of different other controls and different in general fund parks money?
So great question, Councilmember Arias. You may recall that Measure P, there is a requirement to have an annual audit done. So that actually did get completed and was presented for acceptance to the council in December for this previous year. So that'll continue to happen regardless of what the work that we do here. What Critty and the team will do is through interviews, conversations, see if there's a particular area of concern or heightened potential risk in some of their operations, and then make a recommendation for how we focus the work that she does, complementing, or I guess I would say in addition to the formal audit that is done by an external auditor.
Okay. Do you, controller and auditors, do you guys have the capacity for to audit some of the homeless housing funds that have been received and distributed by the city?
So what we've done at this time in the full risk assessment report that you've received is this is the plan that we've outlined based on the process that Critty just went through. And in there, you'll see the hours that are quantified based on the staff that she has assigned, of course. And so with that assessment and the recommendation that you see here, this is what we intend to cover over the next 12-month period.
So, so you're basically, at this point, you're saying no, your capacity is already met for the next 12 months?
What I'm saying is this was the plan that was developed based on the formal risk assessment. And so from that point, we look at, you know, the bandwidth, the team, of how they're comprised. And so this is what we plan to prioritize based on the risk assessment at this time.
But we're not required to follow the risk assessment.
We're not, no, and that's why we presented here to the committee. You know, if there was something else that we'd want to pursue, it would just mean shuffling around.
The reason I ask is I know, like, public utilities, public works, that's police, public utilities, transportation, planning development, that's everyday work that you guys all do. So those department directors, their feedback, I'm sure leads you to prioritize them as high risk. But in the last 3 to 4 years, we received about $250 to $300 million in state and federal resources, one time in nature, a significant amount. And it wasn't until like this year that we've had a housing department, a robust multi-person housing department. So we didn't have naturally lifted to the top priority. I'd like us to look at some of the homeless funds. We've been funding quite a bit of shelters, quite a bit of vendors. Just in this week's council meeting, we have a few $1 million more to award. And we did most of those through a no-bid process during the declaration of emergency. So I'd like to see that incorporated into the next 12 months worth of audits. And, you know, parks, as you indicated, you just did an annual audit there, requirement by Measure P. I think that can go kind of down around the list and maybe replace it with auditing some of the homeless resources that we've received and redeployed out.
I think it would be a good idea to maybe zero in on areas where we aren't already audited in that arena. So obviously HUD keeps a very watchful eye on us and monitors us constantly. So perhaps we could look at the various funding sources for the homeless services and zero in on something that we're not already being monitored or audited on.
It could be the COVID or the ARPA funds that we put towards shelters.
Thank you. Thank you, City Manager. And I was actually going to mention that just so you're aware, and you'll hear a little bit in my update here in a bit, there is oversight and audit and review of those types of resources. Doesn't mean, you know, if that's something we still want to pursue, absolutely your prerogative, but I didn't want to leave with the impression that that there's not strict review of spending, particularly of federal funds, ARPA, HUD. There's a structure in place. We can complement it and hone in on maybe some areas as we we see fit, but I just wanted to make sure that you understood that our external auditors review those resources as well.
You're absolutely right, and I know that your internal auditors did too. When we did the COVID relief funds for housing and rental assistance, whatnot, all those funds were audited to make sure that they were spent per the scope of the contract with the third party. In this case, a lot of community-based organizations, the UC San Francisco, all those things were continuously audited, and nothing has brought to my attention that found that they didn't land or arrive to the recipient that was being targeted. So I'm comfortable with that. What I'm looking more for is the shelters that we've operated, how much money is going in, how long, how many people has it helped, what is the estimated cost for each individual that was supported, to give us a really good and clear picture ongoing what that level of effort would require in the future if we were to repeat that. So, but I fully am aware that all those state and federal resources are audited to make sure that we don't have to repay them back for misuse. But I think we should do a complementary audit of the homeless resources specifically.
I think you're talking about more of like a efficiency, effectiveness
Correct.
type review, more so than a financial audit.
Yes, yeah, I'm not interested on, I don't have a doubt that the money was spent for the target population.
Sure.
I'm really looking forward to is how much did it cost us per participant to shelter for a year or 2 years? How much did it cost us to transition to permanent housing? Things of that nature. So it might be a little different than your usual financial audit.
Sure. Okay.
We can chat about
We'll
that.
take that back. Yep.
Okay, all right, I think let's move on to the third and last item, the CAFR, or looks like the letters are switched around now.
ACFR, yes.
ACFR, yeah.
GASB did institute a name change. I think this
Okay.
might be the second year. So thank you, Chair Esparza. So as I'm sure you know, but just for the viewing public here and later, the ACFR Annual Comprehensive Financial Report is a set of financial statements that municipalities need to complete each year, requiring it to adhere to the governmental accounting standards. The report is audited by the external auditor, like I just mentioned, and I'll go through some of their opinions and findings here in a little bit. What I'm reviewing today is the financial activity ending June 30th, 2022. And so on this next slide, I've just presented, of course,
Santino, can I interrupt you for
Oh,
a
I'm
second?
sorry.
I'm so
Yes.
sorry, pardon me. Council members, I just wanted to take the opportunity to introduce to you Mr. Caleb Neufeld, who's here in the audience, our Assistant Controller, who jumped in and was instrumental in assisting Mr. Denisi in wrapping up the audit. And then also joining him is a familiar face, Courtney, who also has just been a utility player all the way around. So that part of our key team here, assisted by our internal auditor that you've already met, and then we also have Alma Torres here, Deputy City Manager in the audience. But just before you go on, Santino, and thank you for indulging me, we have had such a challenge in completing this report for you for the fiscal year into June 30th, 2022, and could not have been possible without the dedication and great personal sacrifice of not just the team here, but also Suzanne Galvan and Scott Zalewski, and I just wanted to give a little shout out to them and thank them. We wouldn't be here without their support. So thank you for indulging me.
No, please, thank you, and absolutely agree. I was going to save my remarks for the end, but they've been incredible. There's been a number of challenges this year, as I'm sure you can imagine. So on slide 8 here, what I've done is just provided some high-level summary points. I won't read through them other than to note for both the general fund and all funds, you're seeing the net position improve for both years. On slide 9 here, I'm talking through a little bit of what the auditor's responsibilities are and what they found for the year that's under review here. First off, they're expressing an opinion of the financial statements, and their opinion of these statements that we're presenting here is unmodified, which is kind of a quirky term, but basically it's the best opinion level that you can receive, and so excited, of course, to report that. As part of their review, of course, they're identifying, assessing risk. There was no material misstatements found. And then the last bullet there that I'll cover and I'll get into in a little bit more detail here in a couple slides is they did uncover 2 findings as it relates to our financial statement reporting, and I'll go, like I mentioned, into a little bit more detail there. First off,
can you skip to that one?
Sure, I'll be brief, I'll be quick, because I do want to cover this. This was a significant reason why the work took so long this year. One of the reasons, GASB 87 is a new pronouncement that we had to implement, requiring a significant accounting change for any leases the city or any municipality for that matter is reporting. And so there was a lot of work involved with that. And then now getting to the part that you were requesting, the actual results. And as I mentioned on the top portion of the slide, there's the overall kind of opinion of the audit, which is unmodified both for the statements as a whole and then the federal compliance review that they do as well, which would encompass some of what I mentioned, Councilmember Arias, the review of the federal awards specifically. So the first finding that we have here is one, I won't read it, you know, of course have it there in the materials, but is related to GASB 84, which was a new requirement to report custodial funds within the city's governmental-wide statements. And the finding there is a result of not having implemented in time. It was supposed to be implemented by June 30th, 2021. I'm happy to report it is implemented now successfully. And really the recommendation or our response to that, to correct that going forward, is that we have a process and of course a proactive assessment and approach to implement standards as they become available and mandated to be reported. So I feel confident that we'll be able, in fact, there's a new pronouncement next year that we're already focused on working on. So feel comfortable that we'll be able to satisfactorily address that. The next one here is related to our schedule of federal awards, and really the reason for the finding in this area was for two programs, our Emergency Rental Assistance Program, ERAP, and the reporting of our ARPA funds. And now I want to be clear, the reason for the finding is there's the schedule in the audit, which basically reveals to the auditors and to the public the federal resources that we receive and helps inform the auditors' audit of the city, and so those resources were initially omitted from the schedule. The ERAP, because their state funds or federal funds pass through from the state, and so there's a little confusion there around whether they should have been reported as federally. So they should have, and they are now. They're captured in the final audit. That's with relation to ERAP. And then it's listed as the State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund. We know it as ARPA. Those were initially omitted as well, have now since been corrected in the final audit. And I'm joined by Alma Torres, who's going to walk through a little bit of the reason for the change and how we plan to correct that change as well. As the council's aware, the city's in receipt of just over $170 million in ARPA resources, and so the resources that were reported just for and through 2022, some of them didn't make the schedule. They are corrected now, and again, I'm going to invite Alma up to address that. But I also do want to be clear that it doesn't mean that the resources weren't spent in accordance with the program requirements. They were just not shown on the final schedule, and that's now been addressed. But Alma, can I have you come up and talk through our next steps and game plan there?
Controller, isn't that basically just an internal operation thing that you guys have to fix, and it's been fixed?
In a nutshell, yes. I would say our accounting procedures and strategy have since been tightened up. It is going to involve some recommendation and action from the council actually this coming Thursday, and so that's what we wanted to try and touch base on initially. But yes, in a very simple way of saying it,
does that include any additional resources that are going to be requested or positions that are going to be requested? Any additional costs?
No, Councilmember, you will recall that we, in the budget, we left most of the ARPA dollars in the finance department, and I'm going to really simplify this, and we have an action before you on Thursday, where as a result of this, we need to move those funds into each respective department where we allocated. So it's the same amount of dollars, it's no new money, it's just, for instance, we had parks projects, public works projects, but they were in the finance department. So there's an AAR on your agenda for Thursday to move each one of those amounts of money into its respective department within an ARPA line item within that department. So it's more of an internal accounting, but it can be a little bit confusing, and so we really wanted to err on the side of transparency to make sure that everyone was very clear on what the accounting maneuver, for lack of a better term, is, so that everybody was very clear of what we were doing. So I think Alma was going to I find her explanations very helpful when she explains them.
If I may, just from my understanding, basically you're not going to have, the finance department won't continue to hold all the ARPA funds. Instead, they would be assigned to each of the respective departments that were awarded ARPA funds, correct?
Alma, go ahead.
Good afternoon. So it's going to be two things. One is going to be any funds that were budgeted in the ARPA fund within the finance department are going to be reallocated to the respective departments doing the work. Then there is the second portion, which initially the budget for the ARPA revenues was built within the general fund. That is now going to be moved. So any budget that existed for ARPA-related projects only will be reduced in the general fund and increase in the ARPA fund.
My
So-
prediction is that we're going to see that a lot of these projects that we plan to use ARPA dollars for are not going to get off the ground in time to see to fruition by the time these dollars have to be expended. So
And actually, this is going to be very helpful because we don't have to dig in the general fund to find these anymore. They're all going to be outlined in the ARPA fund. And we can see on a monthly basis how we're progressing. And at that time, with the administration, you can make decisions to correct that.
So we'll be able to see when it comes to budget time, under a line item, how many dollars of ARPA that they have.
Absolutely. So
department.
in your line item detail, you can always refer to Fund 2000-2041, and those are going to be all ARPA-related projects.
Whether partially or wholly.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so the way that we typically budget is we're going to go ahead and budget for what we think we're going to be using in the next year, but at some point, we're going to reconcile to see whether we actually have that much available because of the way that we build the budget.
Yeah. With this shift, what's the implication to the city's general reserve fund policy? Because when this was on the general fund money, that pushed up what the full amount for the general fund is, and then we said the now 5% mark is X.
So we did account for that. So the budget director did account for any of the ARPA projects. However, with this reallocation, it's going to be a little bit more clear. So that our 10% reserves or whatever it is that we're setting aside will be a little bit more coordinated and
Correct.
transparent.
But I'm also asking about the city's general reserve fund.
Yeah, we
Because
did-
that is based on the city's general fund,
It'll be-
right?
It doesn't include one-time funds,
Correct.
Got it.
so it's the ongoing.
All right, perfect.
We didn't artificially increase the reserve as a result of ARPA funds.
Okay, that makes sense. My only question on the CARV report is, prior to most of your time here in your current roles, we had a situation that was very public about $640,000 going missing. And when we dug into why that wasn't brought to our attention, we were told that that was disclosed in the CARV report. That's, 1,000 pages and in some line item somewhere where it wasn't actually, identified, but somehow was disclosed in some accounting gimmick. My very, very direct question for staff is there any loss due to fraud reflected in this report above $100,000 that has not yet been reported to council or publicized? Are we repeating the past behavior of incorporating losses that have yet to been reported to the council or disclosed to the public?
Not to my knowledge.
And-
I'm not aware of any.
Yeah, sorry for the hesitation. Not mine either, and I'm just trying
Not
to.
trying to gotcha.
No,
You
no,
can come
no.
back and tell
No,
me if it's the
we're-
case or
we're
not.
like-
No,
Yeah.
no, of course
No.
not. Never. Because, staff never hides $600,000 missing somewhere. But anyway, there's reason to be skeptical. So there's no losses reflected in this report above 100,000 that have yet to be reported to the council due to fraud.
The only reason I hesitate is I'm trying to remember the timeline of that incident. That activity may be captured and reflected. I think it occurred by the end of June 30th. So,
It was 2 years ago.
okay, then never mind. I'm sorry. I can't
Fiscal
recall.
year, June 30th, 2021.
2021. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, other than that, there's nothing that
Perfect.
I'm aware of.
Thank you for the presentation.
That's all I have, so thank you. We did, I'm sorry, well, I know she covered it. We had added some slides for Alma to explain, but I think it sounds like the council members are pretty well up to speed on that. So other than that, we're here for any other questions or comments that you might have. Thank you.
These are more like workshops, but they weren't listed that way, so you should probably call it out for all 3 items.
Yeah, thank you, Director. That'll be it from council so far. We are going to, these are more like workshop items, but they weren't listed that way, so we're going to go ahead and err on the side of caution and conduct public comment on these 3 items, which were, as you heard from staff, an update on the existing audits, an overview of the risk assessment process, as well as the 2022 annual comprehensive financial report. So at this time, we'll open public comments on each of these items. If you'd like to comment, please raise your hand on Zoom, or if you are in the chamber, please approach the microphone here, and you will have your time to comment on each of these items. Clerk, anybody on Zoom? Nope. Seeing no one on Zoom nor in the chamber, we'll go ahead and close public comments on the 3 items today. And yeah, thank you to staff. Thank you for the hard work.
I'm so sorry. I did want to thank staff at the end, and I'm sorry to be purposely redundant, but it was an incredible challenge this year, and so I did want to thank Suzanne, Scott, Caleb, the rest of the finance team, Roberta. I can't say enough about the work they poured in the last few months. It's been tremendous. So as they're watching and hearing, I just want to make sure that they hear that from me. I'm very appreciative of their work. So thanks for indulging me that one last minute.
I would say, City Controller, for the record, this is my 5th year on the council, and this is the best audit committee preparation and the amount of work that I've seen. So keep up the good work, and we have plenty more audits to complete.
Yep, I would agree with that statement. So this meeting is adjourned at 3:09 p.m. Thank you all.